Welcome to the Everyday Rabbi. We are here on set with another fascinating interview. This one's an exciting one, another exciting one with the most amazing Jonathan Anbar. I'll let you introduce yourself.
How's it going? How you doing? So my name is Jonathan Anbar. I am in construction. That's my background. I think we know each other for
Forever.
actually, as kids. And
So there's something interesting about growing up with people is that you never know when you meet them. Sort of like your own
when you
siblings.
re-meet them.
When
Actually,
you re-meet them. So you know their face and then you learn their name, or you know their name and then you learn their face.
right?
And I remember growing up in Chabad, in the Chabad community, where he always hear somebody's name, and then I would always see their face. And then at a certain age, I don't know when I was like 10, 11, 12 years old, I started to fit the two together.
Right.
And realize that.
Okay, I think I know this guy, or I've seen this guy before. He looks familiar, right?
Right.
And,
Not to mention that that when you age, right, like you look different.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to also put together like, oh, this person from my memory who is a young whatever, is now older, and they're the same person.
Well, it's funny how it works because we started coming to your father's shul, right? So my father would bring me, and then you would be running around, whatever. You're the big kid, and I'm only a few years younger than you are. And I remember seeing you around here and there. And then I remember UCF, which is you're talking at least 10, 15 years down the line. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, you're sitting in my apartment, doing Fabringans and Torah classes, and whoever remembers that.
Yeah, that's how it restarted.
And that's how it restarted. So it took a little break, and then from there, I think it took another break, right? It was like a couple of years of like a little down, and then Chabad of O-Town, and then that came around again.
Mm-hmm.
So and then here we are now, doing podcasts. So
here we are, first podcast.
Cool,
it will be the first of many, I'm sure.
First of many.
So we can go in a lot of different directions. There's so much to talk about, as always, and now a few podcasts deep into the Everyday Rabbi. We're really stretching our legs and getting at least the critical topics are getting covered, and then we can go on tangents as necessary. So I know one thing that is most exciting that we do together is the Mitzvah Link. Yep. So we can start with that. What is the Mitzvah Link and how does it work? How did it start?
So Mitzvah Link. So it started off as actually with UCF, Chabad UCF. I came up to Rabbi Lipsker, right, and I was like, hey, I wanted to sponsor a pair of Tefillin. So here and there for a few years, I would sponsor a pair here, a pair there. And
Tefillin, interestingly, actually, we have a couple demo pairs on top. Tefillin are items, sacred items that we wear on a daily basis. It's biblical. We've had a lot of comments on, how do we know and where do we get things from and why is the Judaism today different of thousands of years ago? And it isn't. Actually, we have the same tefillin that we've always had. If you look in the Torah, you're not going to find the word tefillin, but it's one of those things that's been around since the time of Moses. And we put it on every single day. Adult men, 13 and up. Bar mitzvah is officially when that ritual begins.
When you start, yeah.
And there's an obligation both to put it on and I guess to help other people put it on.
Yeah, so that's what we do. So I was on a trip to Guatemala with CYP, and I was, in the back, and a guy came up, for a Torah reading, and he, instead of donating, how a lot of the CYPs do it or a lot of the shluchim do it, like, what's your mitzvah you're going to do, right? So his mitzvah was, I'm going to put on tefillin. And everyone's like, oh, that's amazing. He's like, well, now we have to figure out how to get you a pair of tefillin. So everyone's like, okay, who can help? Let's put like a fund together. We'll get him some tefillin. No one knows who's going to put, what they're going to put. And I looked up and I'm like, I'll take care of it. And then that's how it started, remember? And then I contacted you and we're like, hey, I got this pair of tefillin. How we're going to do this? And then since then, I think we've done about 100 pairs so far.
So the idea is that you're helping people who are committed to put on tefillin every single day, mm-hmm. who maybe don't have the financial needs or means because they, if they would, then they would just buy their own pair.
Exactly.
But they're committed to the mitzvah. Tefillin are not cheap. They seem to be getting more expensive every single year.
Yeah, that's what I've realized.
Rising, because of inflation and everything else, the cost of manufacturing and, mm-hmm. The cost of cows keep on going up. and your commitment to help people do it financially and have them put something in the pot because we want people to feel invested and give something towards it.
And when you feel like you're part of it, it uplifts it even more, right? So, and then that's the whole point, because it's easy to be like, hey, can you take care of this? And then the big rich guy or the macher or whatever is like, yeah, I'll take care of it. But when you work together, right, and you're part of it, you actually, it's even more special because you have a part of it. So, and then that's the whole reason why we did it is, it's easy to just, hand them out, but getting people to be part of it, I think, is even more special because they're also part of that mitzvah. And actually, we've had stories. We had a lot of stories, and some of them were, they received their pair, and then they wanted to give back, so they gave back and bought another pair and gave another pair, another person a pair. So now it's actually, now we're linking them up, which is amazing. And I'm very actually happy that that's the direction that it's going, is that people are helping and people are actually being a part of it.
So we talked on a recent podcast about this idea of giving the givers, and giving is step one. Mm-hmm. And running now our annual end of the year campaign, just to date this podcast. It is interesting. It really is fascinating to see people's understanding of giving, and I think it really transcends money. And I think one of the big misconceptions of tzedakah, of charity, of giving, of generosity, is that people think right away it goes to a number on a check. And it doesn't have anything to do with the number on a check. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe so often would encourage children to put even 1 penny in a pushka. Just give something, and there's no limit to how many times you can give 1 penny. And I think all of us, at least today, can give 1 penny multiple times per day, or at least multiple times per week. But then there's another dimension of tzedakah, which is helping people in general. And I think that's where you have the idea of helping people, whether it's inviting somebody towards, for food, or actually I think food is better than money, because money, the guy still has to go to the grocery store and buy the food and make the food. Yeah. Give someone a meal, it's already ready-made. They could, it's hot on their plate. But then there's more we can do for people. And I think one of the most amazing things that really you helped me become a part of in this endeavor has been to help people with mitzvahs, because we know that a life is not only the material success, the material wealth that we have, it's also the spiritual wealth. And to allow people to have a greater dimension of godliness in their life through the Tefillin and through the Mitzvahs, which you also help fund. And I think that there's a few more mitzvahs in the queue.
And we got some more coming up, Shabbos candles. So we're trying to hit all of them, right? But what I like about the Mitzvahs, that campaign, is they have ambassadors, and then they go and they look for people who need mezuzahs, right? And I think that's another one. That's linking another mitzvah with another mitzvah, right? And then that moves to the next person. And we were at the Shulchan conference, right, at the Kinnis, and we met a bunch of Shulchan that we've helped out, which was amazing. And then now we've got a campaign in Taiwan, which who knew there was Jews in Taiwan, but everything apparently is made there, so it's very cool. And it's you see, and people are getting inspired by it too. So people are also making like their own little funds, and they're moving forward. So it's like people sometimes just need to see someone else do it, because I'm pretty sure that most people would want to do it, but they just don't feel comfortable starting. And when we started, we didn't start that big, like 1 pair of Tefillin,
right.
and that was already half subsidized, and that was already subsidized of the subsidized, and so it started out really, really small. But then that mitzvah basically gave more opportunities to do another one, and to do another one, and to do another one. So thank God, and now we want to build it. That we have our mitzvahlink.com. So now everyone can go and they can see it.
Yeah, we have a few influencers and we're interested in helping out as well.
Yeah, we got some interesting people that are in the queue. So God willing, that's going to be a very cool endeavor.
So just quickly again, what inspired you to do this specifically? Of all the mitzvahs that a person could be involved with and help facilitate, what was so special about mitzvahs and Tefillin off the bat that made it?
Tefillin for me is, I put on tefillin every day since my bar mitzvah, right? And I feel like I can't start my day without coffee, but also without tefillin. And tefillin is like, okay, once I do it, I know I'm ready to go. So a lot of people they like to push tefillin to like the end of the day. They're like trying to squeeze it in. Oh, I got to do the tefillin. But if you do it the first thing of the day, right? That is what starts your entire day. It's a totally different blessing. It's a totally different experience. It's a totally different it's just something else. I don't know how to explain it without you actually trying it.
We a number of years ago we used to put out these little quote of the day, usually inspired by something I had read or learned or studied or something. And one of them I remember was, "The earlier you pray, the better your day."
Mm-hmm.
And right away you responded, "Absolutely true."
Yeah, no, it's true because I see it. I see it when I start the day like really really early. I see like everything just like flows. If I start the day really late, it's not that it doesn't flow. It's just me putting on myself like, oh, now I'm late for this. I'm just rushing. I got to do this. I got to do that. And it's not that you don't bring the bracha on you, but you're stopping it because you feel that guilt that oh, I should have woken up earlier, but now I'm rushing and everything else is going to be rushing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's about guilt so much, but I think that the word of flow,
it's like a self guilt. That's what I
that's
personally
maybe the Sephardic
think.
background in you.
It could be the other half.
I think it's more the flow thing is that when you have the blessings, everything in life, we really have two sides. There's our effort and God's effort, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't need that much effort, but he waits until we do our part.
Right.
That's every miracle. Every miracle starts with something that we do.
He's waiting to give it to you, but you just have to like push.
Right. So it comes back around to another dynamic, which is a big question in Jewish thought and Hasidic thought about how the blessings come down to begin with. So first of all, before a person's even born, they have a certain package that they're given. They're given the tools. Like remember Oregon Trail before you start your game. Right. They're giving you sort of like, and by the way, interestingly, you may even be able to pick your package. Maybe your soul decides what it wants in the suitcase before it comes downstairs. And then you have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, famously, that you pray for that year. That every single year you have this new reset, this new, this new round, this sort of like circuit that you're restarting again, and you get new energy and new abilities. And then there's this famous idea that a person is judged, so to speak, every single day. And there's different answers, different explanations on it. I think the simplest is that they're all true in different respects. The macro picture, the big, your life's things that you can't even change once you're born, that will be part of your birth package. Then you have the yearly, the annual things, how much money you're supposed to make the coming year, which is like the money that's deposited into your bank account. That is the annual package. But then you still have to actually go to the ATM and take out the money. And I think that that's where the prayer comes in. Prayer is literally going to heaven and drawing down the blessing. That's where the flow idea came into. And bringing down the blessing that we already are supposed to have that we need to affect in this world. And that happens through the davening, through the Tefillin.
And through Ishtadlut, right? So like if I'm going to sit, on my couch and be like, oh, Shem, where is it? Where's it coming? Nothing's going to happen. But if I make an effort to actually go out and draw it down, it'll start coming down.
Right. So the word hishtadlut, just to explain, hishtadlut means effort, literally. Bitachon, which is something we could do a whole...
We can work on... That's a totally different podcast.
So bitachon literally means trust.
And we're constantly working on that.
And everything in life requires hard work and trust, right? The famous answer the Rebbe once gave someone who was struggling with something in life. He said, "B'meretz u'bebitachon chazak," right? Yatzliach. A person will become successful. How? Through meretz. Meretz is alacrity, moving. You gotta do stuff. And bitachon chazak means strong trust. A trust that's unmovable. And those two work in tandem. But what's interesting is I think we were talking about this recently, that there's a famous Rabbeinu Yonah that everyone was talking about, that the one doesn't necessarily affect the other, but they both are effective together. In other words, we tend to think a lot that by us doing more, we accomplish more. And it's not always the case. Sometimes we have to trust that everything's going to work out, and then do something, even though that something may not even be the thing that will push the ball to get the thing we have to get done. And those two together are an effective pair. So the tefillin and the work really work together. The tefillin is basically showing and exemplifying that we trust in God. We trust that all the blessings come down from Hashem, everything comes down from heaven, and really God could give us everything we need without our effort. Then the whole question is, why do we need effort in the first place? But we'll leave that at the back burner.
Those are good.
But then we have to actually make the effort, go to work, have a job, and then do that in a godly way. Do that in a way which is proper, a way which is legal. Do the right thing in the right way, even though it may not be, so to speak, a godly endeavor. It may not seem like a godly endeavor, but in the Torah, it actually tells us to go to work. People don't remember this part. Everyone always focuses on 6 days a week you should work, and one day on the seventh day you should keep Sabbath or the Shabbos. But people always focus on the Shabbos part and not on the 6 days.
The working part.
Yeah, you got to work 6 days, and only then could you have Shabbos. Not to get on a whole sidetrack of Shabbos, but to keep it back to prayer, is that the prayer really is recognizing that all the blessings come from above. And once we have that premise, then the blessings could start to flow down when we go to work. And I'll tell you, I find the same thing, that sometimes, you daven at, later in the day, it almost feels like the whole day is struggling.
It changes
but
your day.
Get up, I don't know how early you could daven these days with sunrise. I think sunrise is the earliest.
Now it's really
right,
early.
But you could daven pretty early.
Yeah, you can do
way before.
Hey, there's people that daven nates, but the whole part of prayer and trying to pray as early as possible, you're basically creating a vessel, right? Every time we're creating ourselves, we're a vessel to receive the blessings. So the earlier we daven and create that vessel, the earlier we get the our blessings for the day. And every day, every day the world, the day starts, the world starts all over again. So
this is a very deep idea.
Just because you had a good day today doesn't mean tomorrow's going to be. It's not like, okay, I did everything I need for today. Tomorrow's going to be the same thing. Nope, you got to start all over again. It's like it's a reset.
So I don't know if it's starting all over. It's going to the next level.
Well,
every single day has its own dynamic, has its own abilities, has its own blessings, has its own what would you call it? Its own capacity. And we just recently learned about Avram Avinu. We had somebody, an avid listener to the podcast, who said we have to talk about Avram. We have to talk about the forefathers. So Abraham, our patriarch, was known that every single day he came with every part of every hour, every minute of that day was used to the max. And this is over the course of 175 years. How many of us could say that? Maybe not many, but at the very least, we have to do the most we can. But we're not Abrahams, right? We're, Jonathons and Leviks. But each one of us has to do our own ishtadlut, like you said, our own effort, make our own kelim. What's a keli? You just talked about that for a second. A keli means a vessel. And everything in life has a body and a soul in terms of the entity itself, and then the blessing, as it were, the life force that goes within it. Think of a toaster oven. You got like the actual toaster oven, which is all the mechanical,
physical, and the spiritual,
the hardware, and even the software. But then you actually have to have the energy. You have to have the flow of whether it's battery powered
electricity
or plug powered, exactly. Yep. And that's really the soul. It may take away the social media definition of a soul, which is like this orbing ball of light. But really, the soul is the energy that comes into our physical reality at the moment that we need that physical energy. And by the way, the soul has to be commensurate to the body. If you have too much soul energy, the body will, so to speak, explode. It will be overrun. It will short circuit. Whereas if you have too little energy, God forbid, a person's not able to function. No energy, we all know what happens. The same thing is true with blessings. That the blessing has to go into a receptacle. If you want to pour water into a cup, you have to have actually a cup to be able to fill it up. And the characteristics of the vessel are going to define the way that the blessing can come down. So, for example, if a person comes to a waterfall with a little plastic shot glass, it's too much blessing for too little of a vessel.
For a vessel, right?
So we have to learn, and this is a whole again idea in Hasidic thought about how to make sure that our vessels are not too small, because God's blessings are always immense. They're always beyond.
They're always infinite.
They're infinite.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we fine tune ourselves? How do we create or tap into the right frequency for the blessing? Number one. Number two, create the right vessels that allow the blessings to come in and maintain that the vessels are not fractured or broken, because if that's the case, you could have all the blessings coming in, like somebody who, talk about money, the money comes into the account, but, they're spending all the money on
or they, by God forbid, they have a gambling addiction, or they have,
100%.
There's a lot of people that make
Health
so
issues.
much, that have so much money, but unfortunately it goes to the wrong places. If they, again, like a gambling addiction, health issues, things that, even in the business where things are supposed to be going one way, but it's going the other way. Like all of these
a subscription
things,
that you didn't cancel from 10 years ago,
or that, which we probably all have one of those, but
Right.
we don't have any sponsors for those apps yet. So but and yeah, that's
it all comes down to affecting the blessing where it's most effective. And one of them, so in general, the Jewish perspective, and you can apply this in any sort of construct, religiously or spiritually, is that when we do what we have to do, God enables and allows the blessing to flow forth. This is actually verses in the Torah, right? It's in the Shema. If you'll do the commandments that I tell you to do, you'll have everything you need. And it's amazing how many people second guess this and worry, if I do more, if I close my business on Shabbos, or if I, give charity, I'm gonna go broke. And funny enough, these are the same people who, they're overwhelmed by work during the week and they don't have enough money for even working on Shabbos. So it sounds counterintuitive, and this is one of those things that people can't imagine before they do it that it will work, because they don't understand the dynamic of how it operates, which is that by us doing what God wants, God will give us what we want. It's that simple.
And it's getting that bitachon, right? So everyone starts somewhere. It's not easy. The first to anything, the first step to starting a business, first step to a relationship, first step to donating, it's always going to be hard. But once you pass that level, right? Because Hashem tests us all the time. And when we see that same test coming over and over and over again, we know that we haven't gotten there yet, right? But once we pass that level and we move on to the next level, all of a sudden you see, you're like, wait, what's going on over here? It's like those private lounges at the airports or something. It's like, oh, well, this is cool.
Or the chapel at MCO. It's like a quiet little door. You wouldn't know it exists.
Yeah, no one knows it's there. It's like, but when you push yourself, so basically life is all about pushing ourselves, and getting out of our comfort zones. I'm probably a really good example for getting out of my comfort zone. You know me for the longest time. You've seen me grow from a kid to where I am today.
Realistically, I would add also, it's not jumping out of your comfort zone and packing your bags and going to Israel. It's something that's a practical move in a positive direction, which is a little bit more than what you did yesterday.
Yeah, and it doesn't take that much. And when you go, it's going to be hard, right? But when you take that step, it's like getting on a ride, right? Recently, I was on a ride, and my friend was like, "Oh, it's not that bad." And then I get on, and I don't do these things, right? And I'm getting on it, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this right now." But then, you know what? Honestly, I look back at it, and I'm glad that I was pushed onto it, because I don't know what's going to be there, right? So it's like Hashem is like, "Hey, I'm giving you this opportunity. I'm pushing you towards this direction. Take it. See what's going to happen." And I'm sure you're not going to regret it. Like, I have not regretted it since I've taken, all these steps, and I'm sure that no one's going to regret it. The only thing is that it's ourselves that are stopping, right? We stop our own
We
selves.
are our own worst enemy.
We're the worst enemy, our own worst enemy. And I think that once we move past that, and by the way, it's going to be the next level and the next level and the next level, and it's always going to be a different test. And the test, who knows, what kind of test it's going to be next. But
so just to go back, because we're talking about the action and the doing, which I think that is half of it, right? Then there's the other half, which is the bitachon part. So let's talk about the bitachon part, which is almost the exact opposite in terms of mindset. So let's talk about that for a moment. What's bitachon in your understanding?
So when I learned about bitachon,
bitachon again meaning trust.
Trust in, well, as some people say, trust the process, but trust in Hashem. And when I learned about bitachon, so I studied civil engineering, and I was in engineering school at UCF. I would stress out over all these exams and these assignments, and I'm like just killing myself for no reason. And I see everyone like freaking out, and I'm like, there's no way this is how people live. This is impossible. So I remember one day in my room, and I'm like, Hashem, okay, I believe in you. I know that you're there. I know that you're going to help me pass all of this. I'm going to get through all of this. Um, I'm going to do the best that I can to my ability. It's on you now. Like I just took all of my problems and I just threw it up. Like let him handle it because he's like the best boss ever, right? He's like the best father ever. So and since then it just made it so much easier. And growing up as a kid, my father always told me that Hashem doesn't give you anything you can't handle. So anytime I'm in a situation, even till today, if I see that something is like, seems a little hard for me, I just repeat those words and then I just keep moving on. Like, hey, taking it and shooting back up.
So I hear a few ideas and just a few points that you touched on. This idea that God doesn't give you a challenge that you cannot handle is such a, first of all, a reassuring thing. It's also an empowering thing in that God knows your abilities better than you know your own abilities. Mm-hmm. And the terminology, I believe, in the holy books is lepum gam lashichna, right? According to the camel is the load. Every owner of a camel knows more or less what the camel can handle. And it knows if you overburden the camel, it will counterproductively collapse and you're not going to get anything done. So you want the camel to be able to, you want to get your max load in your truck, but you can't overload it or else you're going to get nothing.
Right. Well,
it's like
it's
Pythagoras' cup.
It's like those guys that, they strap things onto the back of their truck like, yeah, I got this. And then, sometimes they'll just fly while they drive on, I-4 or something. But
right. So God knows what we can handle. Mm-hmm. And in that, he gives us the full capacity, maybe not all at once. He eases us in and gets us to full capacity. And this reminds me of a story that I remember from one of the big rabbis in Israel, that he was working on a couple of projects. One of his projects was to, 7 projects I think he was working on at the time. One of his projects was to translate the entire Talmud into Hebrew, which had never been done, at least modern Hebrew. So he was overwhelmed. Anxiety, it was just not sleeping, and it was too much. So he decided he has to ease the load. So he goes to the Rebbe and asks the Rebbe, he says, of all these projects I'm doing, which of these projects do you think is most important, least important? Which one can I cut from my regiment? And the Rebbe says, you need to take on more projects. And he walked out of the meeting and he was dumbfounded, because that's not the answer to the question. It wasn't even the question, right? And one of the Rebbe's chief of staff came over to him and he explained, and he said that the vessel that we have could sometimes have different characteristics, as we mentioned. So, for example, if you have a piece of plastic or a piece of glass or a piece of metal, that could handle different amounts of volume depending on the ability. And maybe this is a good example for the camel, is, if you have a very thick piece of metal, it's dense for no reason. It could really be thinned out and expanded and allowed to hold much more volume. Of course, if it's too thin, right, then it collapses, and you make a big barrel out of paper. It's not going to hold that much volume. So we have to have this ability to be able to do the most that we can do to our own abilities, the best of our abilities, doing what we can do best in this world. Because every one of us is there for a reason. If there's 8 billion people in the world, every single individual person is here for a reason. And you have to find your reason. You have to find your purpose. Finding that purpose might be a challenge, but that's maybe the first challenge in actually having a sense of personal fulfillment in life.
Right, or in a direction. But every time you pass that level, you gain a new skill set. It's like kind of like playing a game, really. And you're always gaining like another skill that you never thought that you would need before, or that you had. But it just came out of, necessity, because you needed it in order to fulfill that challenge that you had. And every time you move towards these challenges, new skills come, new people come along, because sometimes you're unable to do it by yourself, but all of a sudden you're put in a position where the right person at the right time comes. Because there's no such thing as a coincidence. Everything is hashgacha pratid. Everything comes at the right time. And that's another thing that sometimes when you're growing a business and you're trying to grow too fast, you're going to fall, you're going to fail, and it's going to crumble even quicker. And it's all about foundations. How many times have we gone out for cigars and talked about building the right foundation and anything? Business,
waiting for the right time.
Waiting for the right time. It's because when all of those come in together, that you also have the blessing and the right blessing. Because you can have the wrong blessing too at the wrong time or at the right time, but you don't know that. And
so
again, and it's also, I know we're getting like a bunch of
Well, there's a point I want to get
together.
to, and you touched on houses, so I know that all millennials are trying to buy a house today. When we were trying to buy our first house, we found a very interesting answer from the Rebbe, and it was sort of along these lines about trusting in God and trusting the process and doing what you have to do. And this particular letter sort of had two messages in it, both related to buying a house. Rebbe writes, with regard to buying a house, you should act with alacrity, act with haste. Something comes on the market, you gotta take, make the phone call. Don't wait around. At the same time, in the same letter, the Rebbe says, at the same time, all delays are for good. And I think that sort of encompasses our philosophy that we have in a lot of life, is that if you trust in God, if it's meant to be, it will happen right away. And if it's not meant to be, it will happen when it's supposed to happen, if at all. And it's about doing what you have to do, acting quick. Don't be lazy. Don't paralysis analysis, right? At the same time, do what you need to do, and when the opportunity comes, when it's the right opportunity, it will happen exactly how it's supposed to happen.
And if you see that it's like everything you do and it's still not working out, like don't keep pursuing it, because you're going in the wrong direction. And sometimes we get stuck with going in the wrong direction because we're trying to make something happen out of nothing, and sometimes that doesn't work either. And when it's supposed to happen, like you said, it's going to happen in the right time. And delays are not a bad thing, actually.
So this touches on a question I get a lot, which is, when do you pursue an opportunity and when do you stop pursuing because it's not meant to be? And I think that what it has to do with is trusting that if this is worth doing, then it's worth pursuing. And if it's worth pursuing, you pursue it to the max of your ability. Now, if you've exhausted your abilities, then you know that I'm no longer capable of doing this. And I think the Rebbe talks about this in one letter in response to somebody who was like, I'm trying, it's not working. And the answer was to the effect of, if this is meant to be, it will happen. It will flow. It will flow in the right direction. Now, if you know it has to happen, like a person wants to get married, a person wants to buy a house, this is not something which a person doesn't just throw up his arms in the air and say it's not going to happen.
Yeah, this is not the same thing as giving up.
Right. I think that there's giving up on a goal and then pursuing a goal. And as long as you know the goal you're pursuing is worth pursuing, you should pursue it and keep pursuing until you get there. Especially if you're making progress. I think that's another barometer of it, is that if you're not making any progress, you're just the same place you were 10 years ago, yeah, that may not be your vocation.
Right. So either you're not doing something right, or this is really not meant to be.
Right. But if it's working, if it's moving, but it's just not moving fast enough, take your time.
Mm-hmm. And also enjoy the process. So a lot of people, they're waiting until they get to that end goal and then they can enjoy. You're never going to enjoy. Actually, it's going to actually make the entire process even worse. Right. So when you enjoy that process, because that goal in the end actually might change. And as long as you're enjoying every single step, it's like, I'm enjoying that left turn I just made, and I'm enjoying that right turn I just made. And because you're going to be going, left and right, left and right, left and right. But in the end, you're going to get to where you need to be. But instead of being exhausted, getting to the top of the mountain, you're actually, you're going to enjoy getting to the top. It's a huge victory.
Yeah, and once you get to the top, there'll be another mountain.
And there's going to be another one. Just because you got to the top doesn't mean that's it. You're done.
Right.
You move on.
Sometimes getting to the bottom of the mountain after the top is harder than.
Oh yeah.
Because there's no ambition anymore. Now it's just the actual toil of getting back down. And then after you buy your first house, after you get your building, after you launch your project, firm, whatever you're trying to do, get your degree, then the process continues. we recently were at a celebration for somebody who got a new building, which we actually happen to be in right now. And we were talking about how the next day life just goes on. And you have to,
you move on to the next one.
You're just doing what you did yesterday in maybe a nicer space, in a bigger space, in a more capable space. And that's true of everything in life, is that, once you get married, that's not the end of your life. That's the beginning of your life. Now you have to start working on your relationship with that person and building a relationship with that person, building a family and so on.
It never ends. You have to build and build and build and build, like a business or like a relationship or like friendship or anything that you do. There's no like top. You don't just get to the top. There's always like a bigger fish. Everyone thinks, oh, this guy is the richest guy. Nope. Then there's going to be another rich guy, and there's going to be another rich guy, and that it never ends. So, and you have to keep moving, right?
So to touch on another theme of this, on this journey, on this process, we're learning now about Joseph, and going through the parsha itself, going through the midrash, and then going through the Hasidic explanations of the parsha. One thing I find fascinating about this week's parsha is the fact that there's only so much a person could do in their life that is within their capacity. And there are certain times that God gives us a mission that completely transcends everything that we ever knew was possible of ourselves until that point. We saw this with Avraham Avinu, with Abraham and Sarah, when they had to leave their hometown and start a new life, literally start a new mindset, I don't even want us to use religion because it was bigger than religion. It was a movement.
It's a new everything.
It was a worldwide movement of divine consciousness in the world. The world's not a jungle. It's not a world that just evolves and that things are just here for no reason. Everything has a purpose and everything came from somewhere. That was Avraham Avinu's advancement. And come to Joseph, which is his great grandson, you find that the whole story of Joseph, which we could call Yosef, being sold by his brothers, which is a whole other story about why that happened. But what ends up happening is, from Joseph's perspective, because this is what we want to focus on, from Joseph's perspective, everything was divine plan. And you used that term before, I didn't get to translate, hashgacha pratis, which means divine providence. Divine providence means everything is ordained by God. God is running the show. He's moving the pieces around. Yes, there's free will. We can talk about that later. But in terms of us, where we are, the fact that we are where we are, how we are, in the family we are, in the generation we are, in the place we are, is all by divine plan. Mm-hmm. And if God needed us somewhere else tomorrow morning, we would be somewhere else. Exactly. And we find that with Joseph. Joseph's sitting in his house with his father. Everything's great. Yeah, he has a little rift with his brothers, only because he sees a higher vision than they do. And they don't really appreciate yet his perspective on life and his ability to see a bigger picture, which eventually became the Jewish people, if we think about it. But within a short amount of time, he ends up in his status of, favorite son of Yaakov, favorite son of Jacob, and he ends up in a pit. From the pit, he ends up sold as a slave, and being sold as a slave, he ends up in a in this household, which there's all the drama going on between the master and his wife and all that, and Joseph himself ends up being put in prison for 10 years, which gets extended for 2 years, and comes out of prison as a dream interpreter. Next thing you know, he's the viceroy of Egypt, and he's not only running Egypt, but running the entire known world at that time, because Egypt basically became the powerhouse. They were the only one that had food. Mm-hmm. All the people, including his brothers and their families, had to come down to Egypt. Yep. And then that set the stage for the Jewish people really going into Egypt, which again was a selling of slavery into Egypt, which again could be seen as a negative, right? What's worse than being, in national servitude? But then leaving Egypt, emptying Egypt of all the gold and silver that was rightfully theirs because it really belonged to Joseph in the first place. We know that story from this week's Torah portion. And then they leave Egypt and become one of the greatest nations that ever existed through, look at the time frame of Solomon, right? King Solomon, it says the Jewish people were on a high that we never saw in history and we won't see again until the Messiah comes, till Mashiach comes. All of this is by divine plan. Mm-hmm. God is moving the parts around.
It's also how you look at it. So, you're going to have people that are going to look at, we were slaves. But then if you look at the other side, we came out with a rechush gadol. We came out with abundant wealth. And abundant wealth, a nation, an entire,
It sounds like what people do in work, right? You slave away for 10, 20, 30 years, and then you're wealthy. Nobody becomes wealthy overnight. And people who do, that's not their money. They're really playing with other people's money. It's lottery winnings are not money you worked for, and therefore you don't appreciate it. You don't really understand it.
Well, statistically, most of the people that win the lottery lose it. So
I don't know how many people know this, by the way, but
I don't think
like
many
the
people
day you
probably
win
know
the
that.
lottery is the end of your life as you knew it, and you have a whole new life that starts. And if you don't know and or prepared for that new life, then it destroys you.
Yeah.
Because it's the blessing. It's like standing under Niagara Falls with a cup, right? It will probably kill a person because of the immense power and blessings that come down. Blessings are not always positive if they're not used for properly or prepared for properly. So now I know a lot of people who, maybe not a lot, I know people who the more money they make, the more successful they become, the more personable they become, the more charitable they become. And I remember I once went to a synagogue out in New York City. I don't remember where it is. And my dad told me that there was a guy in the synagogue. It used to be a small little, shul, shtibel, whatever, in Brooklyn. And he said that if he ever wins the lottery, he will build a shul, he'll build a synagogue, and it's going to be, open 24/7, and there's food and coffee available always, and minyanim going. And sure enough, he did win the lottery, and that's what he did. So some people actually use the blessings, not only for themselves, but to help others, because if God's giving you $80 million or $800 million, I don't know what you could possibly, have today, it's not because you need 80 million. It's because you are being given the ability to manage that 80 million or whatever number you want
and
in the right way.
Right. And Hashem, he goes, hey, I know that he's going to take care of it. He's going to take care of my people. And sometimes he gives the opportunity to people and they pass up on the opportunity and he takes it away. I mean, people, made extreme amounts of money, right? And then all of a sudden it was all taken away through, God forbid what, who knows what.
So, we're talking about millions, but we could also sort of miniaturize that example and say the fact that we're even alive in this world, the fact that we have breath in our lungs, the fact that we have enough food today to sustain us till tomorrow, the fact that we have a place to sleep tonight, if we have all that, and that is a lot, that's already more than maybe most people had in history. Or
you're talking about what you just said. Most people, that's most than what people have like in the entire world. It's
right, and to different extents. But the question is, how do we use that ability? How do we use, now that we're alive and now that we're breathing and now that we have food in our belly and air in our lungs and some money in our pocket, how do we use that ability to now make the world a better place, to enhance our own life and the life of the world around us? I think that's the critical question a lot of people don't focus on, is why are we here? What is the purpose? And we can get into, we go from hard work to trust to purpose. It's all interconnected in the sense that the purpose for which we are individually here is also part of the reason why we are all collectively here. Why did God create the world? Recently we spoke about, the big questions and the small questions, and not asking the big questions. This is one of those not only big questions. This is a critical question. There's a cute story about a rabbi in Australia who, there's different persuasion groups in Judaism, as you well know. Different groups like to focus on different things within the observant Jewish community.
Right.
And Chabad has its own unique focus. And one of the unique focuses is this idea that God made this world in order for us to be in this world, to make this world a better place. And it's not an original Chabad idea. It's not even an original Hasidic idea. It's in the Midrash. It's in Mechilta. It's maybe obscure. It's maybe unknown and definitely under-focused on. But that, if you think about it, is really the kernel of wisdom. It's the needle in the haystack that makes everything else start to make sense. And not everybody agrees with that. So the Rebbe sent this Australian rabbi, to find out why are people so resistant to change? Why are some people so resistant to this Hasidic momentum? And he came back and he said that they had two answers, two issues. The two issues was, the first issue was that when the Chabad leadership, the Rebbe, wants to do something, he doesn't consult with other rabbis. Generally in the Orthodox world, there would be agudas and people get together and you discuss and you vote and so on. And the Rebbe sort of does his own thing. And the second issue they had was, what is this deal with focusing on the purpose of the world, the purpose of life? And the Rebbe responded by saying, if we can't agree on the purpose of life, how could we discuss anything else? Like, the premise is different. And I think that what that means, the way I interpret that story, is that we have to really bring home this idea that the purpose of life, the reason why God created the world, and there is a reason, and there's a known reason, and we understand the reason. It's been explained over 250 years already in detail, graphic detail, is that we are each individually here as in part of a collective reason to make this world, to transform this physical world, not the spiritual world, not heaven, not the divine realms, to change this physical world, Earth as we know it. Whatever's out there in the rest of the universe, we don't even know yet. But to transform Earth as we know it, not to go to Mars or interplanetary travel, at least not yet, to transform this world from a jungle into a garden. And if this was the Rebbe's inaugural address, by the way, this was 1951, the first, official Hasidic idea that was shared, which was the last idea that was shared by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe made this his entire, worldview, is that we are here to make a difference, to make an impact. And this is not chump change. This is not a side project. This is not something else that God wants. God's busy with other stuff. This is the purpose for which the world is here. Now, if we understand that, then each individual person, wherever you are in life, you could start to say, okay, what's my purpose? How could I make this world a better place? And that might be by sharing wisdom on a podcast, and it might be by sharing, charity at work. It might be doing the work you do. Your work might be charitable in some way or another. Steve Jobs once said, my charity is my product. Which maybe not be a Jewish perspective,
Yeah.
But that is a way of saying that my contribution to society is what I do every single day. I go to work and I'm trying to make this world a better place. I think Elon Musk calls himself a public servant. The same idea. We're trying to make this world better. If you're not trying to make this world better, you have to ask yourself, why are you here?
Well, that's why each one of us has our area. It's like a clock, or it's our watch, right? A watch is made up of different little parts. So if we were all the same part, then we wouldn't be able to tell time. But because, you might be the minute hand, I might be the second hand, or I might be a little gear, or I might be the little screw. So because we all fit together, that's the way the world runs. It's basically like it's like a watch.
And if one part of that watch is not there,
then it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And I think
that's what's so special about, about all of us, and everyone has their purpose in life and what they do and what they bring. And some people, it might be monetary, and some people will be physical help, and some people will be psychological help, and and you never know what
So there's two practical lessons in this. One is everyone loves to talk about equality, and there's equality of I forgot the two equalities. I think it's for quality of input, right? Quality of help me out. No.
No.
Equality of outcome,
yeah.
Right? I'm blanking. But in terms of equality, the Jewish perspective on equality is we're equal in our significance, even though we may each have a different significance. And the example I like to think of is an orchestra. When you have an orchestra, like a watch, every single piece
is significant.
100%. Now, you may not think it's significant. There's a famous story about, I think it was Toscanini, the big, I think he was a musical, orchestrator, and he was able to hear over the radio that one of the musicians was out sick or something, because that piece of that line was missing. If you're fine-tuned to the process, you understand, you see that if not every moving piece is there, then something's lacking, something's missing in the world. And to God, there's 8 billion moving parts, and every single person, man, woman, child, doesn't matter, has a integral part. Otherwise, there's that line that always goes around. I don't know if it's from the Rebbe or Reb Nachman. I think it's Reb Nachman, that the day that you were born was the day that God decided that you matter. Because God doesn't need 8 billion clones of the same thing. God needs 8 billion individual people, soon to be many more, 8 billion individual people doing something significant. And if a person's doing the wrong thing, and this is the second analogy I was going to give, is imagine, I think this is given in Chassidus, is that imagine you have a boat, and a guy rents a cabin, in the bottom, section of the boat, and he's drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat, and of course a whole uproar on the boat, and the captain comes down and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Listen, it's my cabin. I rented it. I could do what I want. I could drill a hole." And the captain says, "This might be your cabin, but we're in this together. And if you make a hole in your cabin, you're also making a hole in our cabin." And I think that that's a dual way of looking at the world. Is number one, to be significant, to make a significant impact in a positive way. And the second is not to mess it up, not to destroy the world, and that to realize that each one of us has significance. It's not just us in our own little home. People say, I'm not hurting anybody. You may not be hurting anybody intentionally or actively, but if a person is going the wrong way, a person is going the wrong direction, and if they're moving the ship backwards, they're moving progress back, then they're, by definition, stopping the progress from going forward. And I think that to see this world as a collective, we don't say tikkun, tikkun olam ha-Yehudi, the rectification of the Jewish world. It's a rectification of the world.
The world, yeah.
And I think that's why you have to have your, save the tigers and save the whales and save the planet and Earth Day and all these things. That's wonderful. But there's so many different components to that. And yes, we should be more conscious. We have to be more conscious of making this Earth a better place instead of, number one, trying to, go to different places. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But most significantly, making this world better. How do we each individually make this world better? And not everyone has the same job. Not everyone has the same, occupation in doing that. But we all have the same responsibility in doing that.
And we have the same goal.
We have the same
and
goal.
when we work together, we should have the same goal. And I think when we work together, we're able to bring, Mashiach, right? Because that's the ultimate goal, and the continuation of, of our heritage, our people, and the world to come. So,
and to touch on that last point is I think there's so many misconceptions that we're gonna try to work towards. I mean, I read some of the comments. I read all the comments on YouTube and Instagram and all the other platforms that we're on, and we appreciate the comments, especially those that are not snarky and they're actually trying to learn, and study, and understand. There's so much to discuss, but just one idea is that the Messiah, the Mashiach, the utopian age, is not a Jewish idea. Not only is it not a Jewish idea, but it is accepted, I think, from the words of Isaiah and other prophets, as true in multiple religions. And even those who are secular, even those who may not be per se, Jewish, still share this idea that we're going to get to a time and a place and an era which is going to be better for everybody. And there is a problem, a deep problem, if the Messiah is only personal, or the Messiah is only nationalistic or religious, specifically to your religion. Right. In that, if the world's only be better for a certain amount of people, that's not a Messiah.
No.
That's maybe a rapture.
That's
maybe
the collective.
a global destruction, except for a few people who are saved on an ark somewhere. That this is not going to be a flood that's destructive like the flood of Noah, that a few people are saved and the rest of the world can be doomed. This is a global change, and this is happening now. It's been happening for the last few thousand years, and it's been speeding up. It's a accelerating process that at some point the world will be technologically, psychologically, materially, and spiritually perfect in every single way. Now, there are different stages of getting there, and even in Mashiach per se, it's a very misunderstood. Even within the religious Jewish world, people don't really understand what it is. People think it's just going to be everyone's going to have pink Ferraris and candies growing on trees, and everyone's going to have money. It's so much more than that. That's like the premise. That's like the basics. Everyone will have what they need, good, and luxuries. But then what? Now that everybody has a pot, a chicken in their pot, as they say, what's next? What do we do then? And that's the critical question. If when we are able to live to 200, 300, 400 years old, whether or not we want to, that's already a whole other question. But then what do we do? And futurists are scared about these questions because some people don't want to live for 400 years because they don't value life. If you don't value life, why would you want to live longer? Right. Oh, I don't want to become old and crippled. Okay, so let's say you won't become old and crippled. Now you're 400 years old and you have the same body of a 35-year-old. The best, most healthy 35-year-old. Now what? Now what is life worth? And if a person doesn't find beauty in that, a person doesn't find purpose in that, a person doesn't find hope in that time, then they have to ask themselves, like, what really is the value of life if we're just a bunch of moving animated bots on a moving planet that's whirling through space at a couple thousand miles per hour, right? Is that it? That's the whole life, and then the sun explodes and then it's all over? That's not the Jewish view. The Jewish view is that it's a progress, it's a process. We're getting to somewhere, and we're getting to an objective. And that objective is not just personal. It's not just nationalistic. It's for the entire world.
No,
It's
it's
for our
global.
children and our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, forever and ever.
And our friends and our families and
We're taking everyone with us.
The entire world. So.
Yeah. So may it come soon. And to make it happen, I think we have the ingredients that we need. We need trust in God. God, Hashem, Eberster, we say in Yiddish, all referring to the same thing, right? God in heaven. We need practical, good work that is to the best of our ability, push ourselves to do what we have to do, and get ready for this global change that's already happening, and it's just accelerating in the world. This knowledge and this passion and this accomplishment of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
A good place to wrap it up.
I think so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Everyday Rabbi. Like, comment, please comment. We love your comments, and subscribe. We have so much more to do, and we appreciate your support. Available on all platforms, The Everyday Rabbi. Tune in next time.